to basically the preparation of this comprehensive annual financial report. This is a document, as you know, that only gets prepared once a year at the end of the year. It is not how you report your financial statements on a monthly basis, which are more in accordance with budgetary principles. And so there's a lot of information that goes into putting this together that the accounting department only has to do once a year. So it's time-consuming and it's complicated to do. As I noted earlier, we did have a few adjusting entries, so that plays into our determination of coming up with a deficiency in this area. But the one thing I want to also emphasize is we've reported something similar to this for a number of years. And with Rick coming on board, I think it was in early 2012, I'm trying to remember the date, a couple years ago, he and his group have made substantial strides, as we report in here, towards taking steps to take more responsibility for this. As I noted, while we had a few journal entries this year, many, many fewer than we had, say, 3 or 4 years ago. Rick and his group also helped prepare components of this, whereas in past years, and again, this is more 3 or 4 years ago, we were preparing this entire document. So strides have been made and significant improvements have been made. There's just a few remaining things that we recommend to get to what I would say all the way there. So this remains an issue, but it's certainly a less significant issue than it used to be, and I want to make sure that that's clear as well. Management has provided a response. You'll see Appendix A, which is a couple pages later, as a response provided by Lou and Rick and the accounting team on additional actions they plan to take going forward. So I would direct you to that as well for their response. And then the last thing I wanted to report on is Appendix B. And Appendix B is a follow-up on an item we reported to you last year that has been corrected. The committee has in past years requested that we provide feedback on matters reported in the prior year if they were corrected. So instead of it just disappearing from the letter and you don't know what happened, we include it in the subsequent year's letter with resolution. So you'll see in Appendix B we had an issue that we reported to you last year about municipal court. So we repeated the issue that we reported to you, and then we also have, after that, the current status. So we evaluated the corrective action that was taken by management. We also have discussion in here about the steps we took to verify that that corrective action was actually implemented and was in place. And based on those procedures, we determined that issue to be resolved. So again, this is just reporting to you resolution of an issue that we had reported last year. I know I went through that all pretty quickly, so I'll pause here and see if anyone has questions.
I have a question. So you mentioned the annual nature of some of the reporting. Are you suggesting that something changed to quarterly or monthly reporting?
Oh, in terms of preparation of this?
Yes.
No, sorry, we're not. For virtually, I'm trying to think. I can't think of a single entity I've ever worked with who did something like this more than once a year. So no, we're not recommending that. My point was just that because it's only once a year, it isn't part of day-to-day routine of the accounting department, and so the information that you have to gather, some of the information that you gather for this document is only information that you need for this document. So that, I was just trying to provide some context for why this can be somewhat difficult to prepare, because it is only done once a year, but I'm not necessarily recommending that something like this be prepared more frequently. That would certainly be up to management and the governing body if you wanted something more frequently, but that was not part of my recommendation.
And on that particular note, I mean, one of the things that is a real challenge for this particular report is an accounting of our fixed assets and their status, their location, their value, and all of those types of things. And as we talked about last year, if I remember correctly, the challenges in those come from the fact that there's, first of all, a large amount of data, some of which needs to be just verified from history, and all of which needs to be verified on an annual basis, both by the accounting, finance, as well as the departments in which those fixed assets exist at the time. And so in some ways, the large scope of that starts to push our resources, both in terms of personnel, and I believe we had talked about a new database system last year that might also help in that?
We did discuss that last year, and we had submitted in the 14 budget process, the original process last year, for funding for a fixed asset management system. And that we had some funding that was approved for that beginning in 14 with a portion of it in 15 as well. And the expectation was that that fixed asset management system would give us additional tools that we could utilize, which would give us more accurate recording with our fixed assets and do so in a more timely and efficient manner. A decision that I had actually presented to Lou because of the financial constraints was to delay that process for 1 year and move the funding out of 14 into 15 to help alleviate the financial status that we had with trying to make the budget work. It is a challenge because we do have quite a few fixed assets. We have over $1 billion if you count BPU, and even if you take the BPU out, there's still a significant amount of dollars when it comes to the fixed asset. Just to give you a picture, when I looked at the report this year, the very first thing I noticed was we had 13,000 entries. So you can imagine the challenge it is to stay on top of 13,000 different entries. We have a plan this summer to go through, and I use the term scrub the information. I haven't had the time to go in and look at those fixed assets with detail to really understand what all we've got in there and see if everything's making sense the way it should be. And so the plan was to do that when we switched over to the new fixed asset management system. Since we are now proposing to delay that, we're still going to go through this summer and try to go through in detail with that. And the hope is, or the expectation is, that when we do get the fixed asset management system, that will allow us better communication with the departments, because frankly we need help from the departments if we're going to really get our hands around those kind of assets and make sure we've got them reported and reported accurately. So that's the long-term plan as it pertains to the fixed asset. And the other thing I might dovetail slightly on the discussion about the preparation of this report, there are an awful lot of things that are in here that don't have anything to do with our regular budgetary process and approval process. And so as Shelley had indicated, when we're going through this report, everything that we're doing, not everything, a lot of what we do are making adjustments so that there's actually several different presentations in here. There's a financial information as it pertains to budget, and then there's the financial presentation as it pertains to the GAAP standard. So we're presenting information in two different ways. And some of it is going to include the exact same stuff, but not everything. And so that's why it can take so long to get through this process. The other duties that we do, while we're putting this together, we still have to pay our bills. We still have to generate the $400 or $500 checks, or 400 or 500 checks a week. We still have to get all of our regular entries through. We still have to do all of the things that we do day in and day out, and tracking the receivables and making sure that's the part of the internal control that she mentioned here that really comes into play. That's what we're trying to do every day. When we get a department that submits paperwork and we come back and say, well, you didn't give us this backup. Well, we have to ask for that, because if we don't ask for it then, they're going to be asking me later, why didn't you get this? Well, a good answer to her is not, I didn't have time and the department didn't want to give it to me. That's never a good answer. So every day, the staff and I go through and we look at each and every invoice that's paid and have to verify and sometimes go back to departments and say, you didn't get us this. And we really greatly appreciate when the departments are understanding, okay, I'll get it for you. We realize it's sometimes an inconvenience, but we still have to get all those things done in the midst of trying to put something like this together.
Mr. Bach?
I think it really, what I was going to comment couples a lot on where Rick was, and I do want to congratulate Lou and Rick and his staff for all the great work they do in going through this through the year. This committee knows one of the more demanding ones you have is that of finance and the number of reports and activities that you request of them throughout the year. As we went through our strategic planning session, we put more pressure on them to do more. When Lou does a whole lot, but he does reach down to his staff members and gets them to do a lot of work, and everybody within him as they come through and put together all these reports. And as noted, the only thing that's really of the significance of this is we should hire another staff person to work on our CAFR throughout the year. I mean, that's really the bottom line when it comes down to a finding, to say you all need to focus more, to put more attention on what you're putting together to get this document done each year. And we'll look to them and I imagine come up with some new additional reports. But I also want to just make one note. You probably all saw that in my notes this last Friday. One of the efficiencies that Lou came up with within the finance department was the consolidation of a couple of positions, then utilization of one of his clerical positions and blending together some of the duties there so he could then break off and get a different program manager or fiscal officer, I remember the description of the position, to be able to do additional work on reports and such like that. So he is constantly looking at different areas to create additional staff people that he can focus on areas that we want to focus on without causing you additional money. And in fact, I think we might have saved a little bit in this joint issue, but still put more people focused during these reports. So good job, Lou. Rick.
Unfortunately, one thing that I recently did falls under the category of piling on, I suppose, because although preparing a document of this nature and this depth and complexity would only be an annual thing, I've begun to have discussions about the ability to report to commissioners on a more periodic basis regarding our budget. Where do we stand? To be able to create a report that doesn't take a lot of time to generate and is neither so complex that you can't understand it nor so simple that it understates a lot of where we are. And so we've begun to have some discussions, and there are many challenges in terms of how it gets created and what gets reported and how it gets explained so that it's clear and simple at the same time. But it is something that I think we all have as a goal, is that in between passing the budgets that we have the opportunity to get an update. How are we doing regarding that budget that we passed? And so, although this document will still only be an annual, we've already started the discussion on how we might be a little bit more periodic with a subset of this information, and we'll see how well we're able to work that out.
Yeah, we've started to look at that, Commissioner, and Budget Office is drafting a preliminary one, and what our expectation is we'll have at least an example report to present to this committee.
Fantastic.
Targeting maybe next month. And I see Commissioner Townsend may have a question. I just wanted to mention that what we're asking for is to move this presentation to the full commission on June 19th. But, Commissioner.
Thank you. I just had a comment more so than a question because I haven't gone through this, but I heard within the first couple of minutes the thing that I was listening for, that it was a clean opinion. So that is significant, and just wanted to recognize what you and your group have done in budget and finance and accounting. So to me, that was the one thing I wanted to hear, and I heard it early. There may be questions later, but I think that's important to us to have that gap I knew that gap before I knew the one on the plaza as an accounting student. So that was the good news to hear. So kudos to you.
Thank you.
So I'm sorry.
You were just going to say, I was going to say, so does this need a motion for?
It does.
Okay, so I move to approve.
Second.
There's a motion and a second to approve the audit report and move it forward to full commission on June 19th. Any further discussion? Roll call, please.
Alfie?
Aye.
Walters?
Aye.
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 Aye. But now I do have one question. Historically, historically there has been a sense that we should pull this off of the consent agenda so that the other commissioners who are not here, and I know Commissioner McGee, we talked about this last year, that possibility is before us, does not need to be decided tonight. It has been unanimously forwarded to the commission, and it can be on consent agenda. I would just say that if anyone wishes to pull it off, we should make that decision fairly quickly so that we can inform Shelley that we would love to hear it again. So we don't have to take action on that right now. Thank you so much. We really appreciate your work.
Thank you.
Yeah, great job,
Thank you.
great report.
Item number 2 on our agenda tonight is also Mr. Levin. This is a request for a resolution adopting a compliance procedure related to securities and continuing disclosure matters. Mr. Levin.
Yeah, in a session last month, we discussed, I think we provided the commission with a little bit of background on this subject, but anyways, the Securities and Exchange Commission is really looking for local governments and other, I'll say, tax issuer entities to ensure that they're fully complying with required disclosure documents. And actually, one of the documents that we're required to disclose on an annual basis is the CAFR, our annual financial statements. And there's particulars on how that document is filed with I'll say a universal agency. Anyways, the procedure that you have before you defines responsibilities for providing disclosure compliance, required training, and the development of an annual compliance checklist. We actually conducted a training with our financial advisor and our bond attorneys last week with about 10 members of our staff, and we included several individuals from the Board of Public Utilities. The BPU is, as you're aware, this month, in the next 2 weeks, is going to do their major financing, and the underwriting firms that we're working with have asked us as part of their due diligence process where we are in terms of continuing compliance, do we have procedures in place, and so we believe it's important to get the procedures that are before you adopted as we move forward. We're asking that this item be fast-tracked to the meeting this Thursday evening. Jody Boating's also been involved with discussion and is available for any questions.
Move for approval.
Second.
There's been a motion and a second to approve the new procedure and fast track to the June 5th full commission meeting. Any further discussion? Roll call, please.
Roll call. Alfie?
Aye.
Walters?
Aye.
Aye. Townsend?
Aye.
Aye. That concludes item number 2. Thank you, Mr. Levin.
Thank you.
For the benefit of the commissioners, item number 3 is in our original agenda packet said documents forthcoming. Those documents were in the additional blue sheet that was distributed after the original agenda. So those documents. This is a presentation regarding the development documents for the public levy site. Mr. Brakovich.
Thank you, Commissioners. George Brakovich with Economic Development. Brent Miles with North Point Developments joining me. We do have a brief presentation to go through, but as Commissioner McKiernan referenced, we did include, well, a little history. We were before this committee in March, and we presented the idea of moving from our development agreement with IRG for the construction of 2 to 3 industrial buildings on this site to moving on a development agreement with North Point for one large 340,000 square foot industrial building. And the direction you guys gave, that sounds like a good idea, and come back to standing committee with the development agreement before we go back to full commission. Since that time, full commission did consider and approve adopt 2 resolutions setting a public hearing on June 26th for both to consider the amended TIF district, since we're taking one large district and breaking it into 3 project areas, as well as considering then the project plan for this particular redevelopment, which is for about 25-30 acres of the site. Unfortunately, we didn't finish all of the edits on the development agreement. However, we did reach agreement on all of the major deal points, and those deal points then are represented in your executive summary. There's really 3 parts to the executive summary. The first focuses on the development agreement. The next 2 are on the ground lease. Since the levy is a site that we cannot sell, we had a ground lease agreement with IRG as part of their redevelopment. We'll now have one agreement with North Point and separate provisions still in place for IRG because they are the owners of the Lady Baltimore facility on the north end of the site. So following that brief introduction, we can jump into the presentation. There we go. Current site layout, you guys are all probably still familiar with this. It's the levee site is on the south end here, Caw Point Park, and a parking area. Then as you move forward, it's a vacant surface parking area that we've leased out over the years. IRG, I don't think they're using the site for anything right now. Then you have A, B, C, D buildings and the old cold storage facility. And then you'll see building E here along Fairfax Avenue, and then Lulu's Cafe is located in here as well. So those buildings are the focus area for this particular redevelopment. Again, it is about 25 acres. In working with North Point, I believe the plan is to demo all of these buildings except for building E, where we think we can relocate some of the tenants that want to stay down at the levee site. And then the large building here on the north end is the Lady Baltimore facility. So some of the deal points that I wanted to highlight real quickly, taking some of the cues that we got from this committee on TIF policy and TIF guidelines, we've definitely incorporated some of those components into this deal. Again, this TIF is only as a pay-as-you-go only. We're not going to be issuing any bonds on the project. That works for North Point. That's obviously a little better position for us. However, the TIF itself is a full 20-year TIF with 100% capture of the increment generated. Now keep in mind that is an exempt site now. How we've done that in the past is the ground is exempt. As these buildings are completed, we file those leases in accordance with a different statute that allow us to assign a separate tax parcel ID for that. And so then between the appraiser assigning a value and the treasurer issuing and collecting the property tax bill, that's how we'll be able to generate that increment. The TIF itself is capped at $9.85 million. This is just shy of a $22 million deal. And then with a 50% test. So at no time can the public participation in the project outpace the private investment. So if for some reason the $22 million goes south of 9.85 being a 50% cutoff point, we'll drop that cap as well. LMW provisions, North Point has proven to be a great partner on all their projects. They don't shy away from that commitment, and on this particular project we have commitments for both the construction of the project as well as professional services, and I'm sure Brent can maybe update you later on where they are on some of their other projects. Prevailing wage, again, although this is a particular piece that has been removed from our tool belt through the state of Kansas changing the law. The existing agreement with IRG was prior to that change and did have some prevailing wage provisions. North Point, again, I think they stepped up to the plate, so there is a provision in here to do the demo and asphalt work of this project, which should equate to no less than $3 million of the project, and they are committed to paying prevailing wage on that piece.
That's fantastic.
It really
Yeah.
is.
The relocation of the existing tenants, like I mentioned earlier, there are some tenants that would like to stay at the site, and I know that there is some opportunity, although it's very limited square footage that's available at Building E, and I'll let Brent kind of touch on that a little bit later. Now, the ground lease payments, so for year 14, we stay at $300,000, which was the same arrangement with IRG. For the corresponding years of 2015 through 2025, that payment drops to $215,000, and that represents the share paid both by North Point and IRG. If you'll remember the previous deal with IRG, that lease payment went down as they demoed buildings, and they had 4 buildings scheduled to demo, reduced that payment by $50,000 per building. But this is the payment we're at with North Point. We also have some provisions within the development agreement itself as to when demo needs to begin on the site, when construction should begin, and then a hard finish date for the project. And that hard finish date is, we pushed it out a little bit, March 1st, 2017. But I think as Brent rolls through their project, you'll see that they have more than enough incentives from themselves to get this project done prior to that date. Brent, do you want to?
Sure. Brent Miles, North Point Development, and if it's fine with you, I'll go over the project itself and then come back to some of those points that George mentioned before, and then of course answer any questions you have. This is the plan that you saw back in March. It's a approximately 342,000 square foot building. Again, as I told you then and presented to the BPU, after that, no one has built a building like this in Kansas City, Kansas. This is a Class A concrete tilt industrial 32 clear height. This is a product that, and you'll see here in a second, that we've had great success with in Riverside. It's typically in the Kansas City market known as a Johnson County product, Lenexa Olathe. This would be their design standard, and this is also the same buildings that we're building down at Edgerton. We don't build any industrial buildings that we own that don't have this requirement. This is a Class A, and for example, in Riverside, Northwestern Mutual is our partner. It's a blue chip product. So I say that as I'm proud of it. I also say that as no one's ever built this in Kansas City, Kansas. So let's risk $21 million. So we think we're confident in the site. We're confident in the location, the access. We think Fairfax is a diamond in the rough. You know what we're doing down in Fairfax with Central Industrial Park. 401 Kindleberger is another project. You've been by there. We've demolished. We have a new project going there. We think Fairfax has been overlooked way too long, and we want to be a catalyst in redevelopment. George, if you don't mind going to the next one. This is a real quick elevation of what it will look like, but here's the reality if you go to the next one. These are photos that I took in Riverside of our buildings there. This is almost exactly the same facade. Anything that you see here is 99% what we would do on this project. I would say one of the differences, we probably use 2 colors instead of 3, just because of how the reveals and the size of it and how everything worked out. I think what amazes most people about our product and the tenants that we get is that they picture the industrial of Fairfax of the 1950s or 60s, your typical smokestack. We joke, we call it pig smelting or something like that. It's not that. That's not our forte. Our forte is really Class A clients. Somebody who says lease rate is important to me, but other factors are more important to me, like proximity to the GM plant or proximity to my customers, or I want a nice corporate image in where I go. And that's who we target. We know we'll never be the low-cost provider. And so I took this because you see the outside of the buildings. This is an interior finish of one of our industrial buildings in Riverside, a company called Velocity. Velocity is owned by Michael Kahn. He owns several businesses in your community. Velocity installs all the GPS units and tracking monitors for yellow freight. So, and now they just picked up a contract to do all the Wi-Fi for Caesars. So all that Wi-Fi is being built for the casinos in this facility, if you can believe it, in Riverside. So looks like a nice, clean industrial building on the outside, but inside this has about 100 employees who average more than $80,000 a year in salary. This is who we target. While it looks nice, knowing what these buildings will be, we put a lot of precautions in when we build it. This is a 2-story mezzanine, so we go ahead and build our building with the ability to do that and convert some of that industrial space to more of an office space interior. And we would plan this building the same way. George, if you wouldn't mind, go back to maybe the deal points real quick, and so I can just touch on a couple of those. As George mentioned and I mentioned, 342,000 square foot facility, kind of hitting on the main points that we know, which I think are important to you. The park access has always been a point of discussion as it relates to the Caw Point site. We are not only required, we have worked with Friends of the Caw to really work out an access agreement. And Mr. Caldwell is here tonight from Friends of Caw. We've come to terms with him on how the park is best accessed. I can speak for him because he told me I could before I got up here. And he said that, you know, he thought that everything was in really great shape and that he appreciated and he knew that we'd follow through on everything that we said. So the park access is one thing that I know got brought up, has continually got brought up. If you've been down to Caw Point Park, the access is poor. It's very poor. And there's potholes that can swallow your car. There's going to be a little bit more time of that as we go through, you know, breaking a few eggs to make the omelet, but all told, it's going to really improve the access to the park. We know, you know, maybe not politically correct, but we know that prevailing wage is important, especially as you deal in the Fairfax district. And so a commitment by our firm to do the prevailing wage, while it does add cost to our project, we know that that it is important, and we want to be a good partner of yours. The LMW provisions we know are always important to you, so we agreed to them on professional services and on the construction side. We just got a report today that was filed with the Unified Government. Just wanted to share with you. You've heard previously how well we did at Village West. This is sort of our first official reporting at Central Industrial Park, which is our other Fairfax project. We had a goal of 17 on the local, and we came in at 35.4. On the minority, we came in at, our goal was 10%, we came in at 22.5. And on the women, it was 5% was our goal, and we just crept over the 5%. We do struggle sometimes on the women provisions, just because there isn't that many scopes. You know, it's electrical and landscaping. There's only 5-6 scopes when you have a project like this.
Doesn't it include professional services also, though?
On CIP, it did not, but on Caw Point it does. And so that's one way that we can hit it better at Caw Point is, for example, we have a couple firms that we do business with that are women-owned. Actually, one of the firms is with women and local, a testing firm that we do a lot of business with. So I think, you know, agreeing to both provisions on the construction and the professional side, and we've far exceeded them on Village West, and we've exceeded them on 2 of the 3 categories really well at Central Industrial Park. Probably tenant relocation has been where most of my time has been spent over the last couple weeks, and I know it's important to you all. We had a commitment from Doug and George all the way through the mayor and you all about how we handle tenant relocation. Just so that you kind of understand the lay of the land, we have about 22 tenants at the site. All but 2 of them are month-to-month leases, and so they're not in long-term commitments. Actually, all 22 are month-to-month leases. 2 of the 22 have a longer notice period than 30 days. And so I've worked literally daily with the EDC on how to best accommodate tenant relocation. We're trying to keep as many of those tenants as we can in Wyandotte County and try to find places for them. We are keeping Building E, as George mentioned. IRG had a management office inside Building E that we don't have a need for, and so we have offered that as a solution to a couple of the tenants who would like to remain on site. And Building E will get some lipstick on it, minimum new paint, but we're trying to figure out if we can afford maybe new windows. The credit union has leaky windows. They need a new door. They want new signage. So we're trying to get a handle on what those improvements cost and what it would cost to relocate tenants into Building E. It has air conditioning. It's an office. There's actually a really nice office. It was one of the tenants, the Kansas Grain Inspectors. They have a long-term lease there till 2018. So we think that that could be a solution to a couple of the tenants who are impacted by this. Again, working literally daily with the EDC on trying to get a relocation plan. One other note, I mentioned this for Mr. Albee, is we did work with the BPU for a grant. We're going to do a Energy Star certified building, and so it's going to have LED lighting, and then we'll also help with the LED lighting that will provide the lighting to the access to the park, and we have included in our maintenance the mowing of the entrance to the park, as Commissioner Murguia demanded at the last committee meeting.
Demanded is extreme.
Well, seemed like a demand.
Strongly recommended. That's it.
I don't know if I've missed anything.
Brent, could you show on your map where how the park entrance will work on this?
Sure.
Because you don't have it fully illustrated here, and then show where Building E would remain as it would stay on the site as well.
I don't know if there's a laser that would help, but this, if you can see the mouse at all, I'm going to put it on the building so you can follow it. This little strip right here of green is actually where Building E is today. And so Building E will park, and there will be a kind of shared parking between this and the access here. This is where the existing stoplight is. So if you've ever been down in this area and you've driven down this, down the off-ramp, there's a quick entrance here, which is how the park is accessed now. Anybody with a boat has almost had a semi up there, when they try to make this right turn. And so the traffic engineers are saying absolutely that has to go away because it's just not a good situation today. And then you have Lulu's right here, which has two, I would call them curb cuts, but they're really large, kind of uncontrolled access into there's a maintenance facility for the UG out front and the small Lulu's building. And then you get to the stoplight. So the traffic engineers have, at this point, said, the single point of access is really important, and this would be primarily used by cars, whereas trucks will primarily use the shared access with Lady Baltimore, because the docks will be on the back side of this building. There could be docks on the front side if a user needed it, and that's why we've shown this area here to the south as a potential paved area, but all probability is that this is going to be car parking sort of along here, and then your access into the park basically hugs Fairfax Traffic Way. Working with Mr. Heatherman and his traffic engineer internally, and I'm sorry I can't remember her name, and our engineers, they're working through the traffic study now, and one concern that they have and that they're studying is potential confusion because there could be headlights obviously coming northbound going down the ramp, and then here's this park access drive that's running exactly parallel in the opposite direction. So would someone be confused? So we're working on how far offset, and could we use landscaping, for example, to create a barrier so that the headlights, so someone doesn't think someone's coming down the wrong lane, essentially. And so that traffic study has been submitted to Mr. Heatherman's office and is under review. I think we have an update meeting on it Wednesday morning to find some of the conclusions. We don't know if a turn lane is going to be required at the stoplight. That's all under review right now by the traffic engineers, which I'll just kind of go directly into. probably the biggest concern tenant relocation-wise is Lulu's. And we think it's an asset. We honestly think it's an asset. In Riverside, we have our office in Riverside. We cater in lunch every day every Friday for our employees because we call it Food Desert Fridays. And we have a similar situation here, which is you're going to have 300 to 400 employees in this building without a close place to eat. You can come up to Minnesota Avenue, you can cross over to maybe the River Market or up to Riverside, but that's still a drive. Having coffee and breakfast and lunch on site, we think is an asset. What we don't know is under this plan, the traffic study and the park access is going right through their building. It's a small, 500 square foot building. And so we are trying to figure out, do we adjust the access and the park and all of that, which the traffic study is still in motion on, or do we try to relocate them to Building E into the space that our IRG had as a management office that we don't need because we manage all our properties from our home office in Riverside. So that's the sort of state of flux that we're in directly with Lulu's, the traffic study, the access, and the park access. And I would say the next 2 weeks will really give us some definitive answer. And then I also have someone looking into Building E on, can I even convert it to a cafe, because of the venting, the lighting, there's no windows in the space, so what am I getting into? Am I getting into an asbestos issue? I'm studying literally about 5 things as it relates to Lulu's. And Shay from Lulu's is here tonight. And so, and then Caw Point, Friends of Caw, I think we're in really good shape with Mr. Caldwell as well, and he's here tonight. So, tenant relocation, it's not fun. The tenants have actually taken it pretty well, in my opinion. They said, we knew this day was coming. Most of them thought they had to be out July 1st, and so telling them at least August 1st has given them some relief. Our plan would be to start in the south and work north, leaving Building D last, which has the most amount of tenants, and that was by design, so that we could give those folks the longest amount of time to find new homes. So I'd be happy to answer any questions that you have.
Move for approval?
Oh,
Actually, this one I think is this for information only tonight? It is.
It is. Oh, it is just.
It is just for information only. But, Commissioner Townsend.
thank you. Good evening. Let me say I am looking forward to this, to the new Diamond there in Fairfax. However, in March, I did make reference to specifically tenant relocation and Lulu specifically. And I'd heard recently, like today, from Ms. Plattenberg. So what I would like to make sure happens is that she and the other management in Lulu's is kept abreast. It sounded like to me today there was a disconnect about what is going to be done, what options are available to that business. If it is still being explored whether or not the turning radius can miss Lulu's.
That's right.
That would be the greatest thing. I know that they would like, Ms. Plattenberg and Lulu's management would like to remain there. For those of you who haven't seen it, it's unique. It sits right on Fairfax Traffic Way in front of where E is, or would be. They've sunk up to $20,000 of their assets and revitalized what used to be an old gas station. They do about 200 to 250 transactions every day between 6:30 in the morning and 1:30 at night. They are the only restaurant in the Fairfax area of any kind. Come on Quick Trip, McDonald's, Burger King. But they are there, and I think it would be unfortunate if this move spelled their demise. So I would like to make sure that they're kept up to date with what the options are. And what I'm hearing you say is that whether or not they will continue to be able to remain where they are is still up for examination, right?
Yeah, it is. What I had, when I met with Lulu's about 2 weeks ago on a Thursday morning, the thought going into that meeting was a relocation to Building E. Quite honestly, that received an emotional response from them. And so we went outside and kind of looked, and I told them that, like I said tonight, it's the turning radius and what the traffic study and what I can work through with the traffic engineers, if that can work, if that building can stay. And I cannot make a commitment that it can. We will work our best to accommodate them, and if that's a move to Building E, we will work through that. But like I said, we think they're an asset, and we'd like to keep them. And we didn't talk about rent or any other things like that. And then I wanted to address specifically why we approached the tenants when we did. And so, as you know, they're tenants of IRG. They're not our tenants. And so we felt that we needed to have an agreement on terms with the unified government staff before we approached any tenants, because if I approach a tenant and the deal falls apart, then IRG will hold me liable for the disruption of their income. So waiting to what we did was a strategic move, and we did that as early as possible. I didn't wait till the lease was signed, which is, July 8th, and say to everybody, you have, 30 days, thank you for your business. We tried to give these folks as much heads up, a 6 to 8 week head start, so that they can start planning. And that has gone, I would say, generally gone over pretty well to that point, is that we didn't wait until July 8th and then, per their lease, give them the 30 days.
Well, I see, the strategy in that, but I guess for someone whose day-to-day income and has been there 4 years, a couple of weeks, it still would be a shock to them, especially if the alternative may mean their demise with the relocation. So I would like to, from here on, make sure, when do you expect that the decision about the turning radius will be made?
I do not know. I'm waiting on the UG's review.
Do we know how long that decision might take?
Like I said, I would guess it's in the next week or two.
Within the next week or two, okay.
That's a guess, but yes.
Okay. The other thing I would like to see happen to make sure that everybody is on the same page is to have a discussion with Ms. Plattenberg about the details of what a possible relocation would mean for them, because it's my understanding that the cost of the relocation itself for them may be prohibitive. So, is Ms. Plattenberg here tonight? I know you said she was. Would you care to say anything at the mic? I know you said you didn't realize that public comment can't be made, but you can. Ms. Plattenberg?
She's here.
Can I do that? I didn't mean to be out of order.
Mr. Caldwell.
Oh, okay.
Shay's here. She's
Okay.
She's back there.
All right.
If you'd like to make comment, then what we'll do is we need to get a microphone over there at that podium,
Okay.
and then we would invite you to,
What?
there, it can just be clipped out and clipped into the, there we go.
And while that's being done, on the first schematic, will there be only just one way in and one way out
To the park.
of the well, not the park, but the main?
One primarily for car and one primarily for truck.
Okay,
The truck is shared with the Lady Baltimore building.
okay.
And those are two that are there today.
Could
If
you
you
put
can go
that
to the next
schematic back up and just show me that? Because I just want to make sure, so.
Yeah.
Okay,
So I'm going to start at the north, which the Lady Baltimore building is there on the north end of the screen there.
Okay.
And then that is an existing shared access now.
I'm trying to see the little point. Where is the cursor? Okay. I guess it's disappearing. Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
That's the first access, which is there today. And then south of that, which is the shared, it could be truck, but primarily car, is there today, and that's where the stoplight currently exists.
Okay. And that would also be the anticipated entrance to go back to Call Point?
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you.
May I make a comment?
You may.
So I'm glad, while we're talking about access to Caw Point, I know this is an old and diagram, but I think it's important from a planning standpoint, when you go to Caw Point, that you feel like you're on a public street, as opposed to sort of being in no man's land like you are now. So I assume that that's when these are developed more, there will be a divider between the paved areas that you show here, for example, and the street that parallels.
Yeah, when we met with Mr. Heatherman, that was a comment that he had as well, was how do you let the public know how that's addressed? And so we came up with a couple of proposed solutions for him: curbing, striping, signage, the landscape, the lighting placement. All of that were factored into how that would look and feel like a public access to the park. And one step further in that detail was how the public can better know what's on the other side of the access. If you've ever been down to Caw Point, you know you're going through the gap. And so signage, potentially lighting is one solution, because your radiuses are so that if you have a boat, it's really difficult to fit you both through the gap at the same time. So how do you best address what we have commonly referred to as the country one-lane bridge scenario? And because the wall is there, you can't do it like a country one-lane bridge, where you sort of wave and there's an acknowledgement, sort of eye contact or something with the other person, hey, why don't you go first? And so we're addressing that as well. But Mr. Heatherman has been really supportive of how our ideas and that we're thinking about that now, as opposed to it's built and what do we do? And so those are all points of that traffic study as well that he wanted included.
Thank you.
Well, it looks like we have two people who'd like to make some public comment on this. And so for each of you, what I'd ask is state your name and address just for the record when you start, and then you'll have up to 5 minutes if you need it to make your comments. Mr. Caldwell?
My name is Mike Caldwell, and I'm chairman of the Friends of Caw Point Park Incorporated. We have a board of directors of 6 people, and we represent roughly thousands of hours that we put in to develop this park in cooperation with UG. We're very proud of it. Our heart is pretty much buried in that park. I've done some research on North Point development, and I found that they have a reputation for doing exactly what they say they'll do, and in all cases they've added more amenities to each project. They're hometown people. They have their heart in Wyandotte County. They're fully aware that the Lewis and Clark Park in Caw Point has been designated as a National Historic Site by National Park Service. They plan to act as a partner to help us protect and bring the site to its full potential. Our Friends of Caw Point Park Board of Directors enthusiastically welcomes their involvement as developers of this unique treasure. And I hope you will approve today what they ask you, and we can move forward. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Ma'am, if you'd like to come forward. Go ahead and just pull that, yeah, go ahead and pull it down. There you go.
Shortest one here. So I'm Shay Plattenberg, and I'm the owner of Lulu's Diner. We opened up about 4¼ years ago, me and my mother. My mom worked down the road there, and she was always hungry, and neither one of us are the type to eat at the gas station, so we decided to, when this space became available at this, what used to be a gas station, was vacant for 22 years. When we saw that opportunity arise, we decided to quit our jobs. I was at my job about 9.5 years for Habitat for Humanity. My mom was at her job for 11 years. Soaked our itty-bitty baby life savings into it, and here we are, a successful small business down here. We have about 700 fans on our Facebook that follow us every day. We do feed the entire labor force down there. We are the only restaurant down there, and that's home-style cooked food, no processed food. We're very proud of the work we do down there, and we feed everybody from the firemen, the policemen, the GM workers, contractors, all the factory workers, everybody, city workers. Kevin Yoder even calls it his spot. I understand now as to why we just had to find out on the 22nd what's going on. We have been told all along that we were going to try to be saved, but I do need to understand it a little bit more. I mean, it's a very, very small building, and I'm just trying to figure out, why or how we can work to where they begin to widen the parking lot just past us, because our customers have all said if there's a way we can stay, they'll support us. They'll park behind us in a single row. So if you do have to take out Lulu's driveway, that is fine, we would accept that, but is there a way that we could, look at it and think of it that our customers could park directly behind us and that we would still be able to stay down there and, remain down there, remain an asset down there, I believe. I know that we would be to the deconstruction, to the construction, and to the new tenants down there. We literally get thanked every day for being down there, and it's not really a question of can you move us? We can't move. That's that. It's not just about moving, it's about turning a shell into a diner again. There's no possible way.
Okay. Thank you, ma'am. What I've heard here at the table tonight is a commitment from Commissioner Townsend and Mr. Miles to really look at every possibility in terms of a good outcome for this. And so I need for Mr. Bach to remind me, where are we in terms of this development agreement? Are we still pending on the development agreement overall?
Yeah, I think we're moving to a public hearing, right, George?
Yeah, actually, we've finished the edits and have a final draft, and the thought is that it's part of the action since you'll have 2 public hearings on the 26th. We'll just make the development agreement consideration part of one of those public hearings. And so all of these documents will be made available, and I imagine there'll be a discussion very similar to this to see what some of these outcomes were and tenant relocation being one of those outcomes.
So what's the follow-up then after we have the public discussion of the 26th? Can we actually take, if everything is agreeable and if we actually reach a mutually agreeable development agreement, can we take action on that night without having to come back to this committee?
Yes.
We can.
Yes, everything is set up now, moving forward to finalize. You'd give us the direction on the terms of the agreement. He's provided you the executive summary, which he's talked through a lot of the points tonight, that are in there that were just these are all the major deal points that you were looking for that you wanted to surmise, and that's what George touched on when he started his presentation, were some of the hot topics that you all had brought up and how we had incorporated them or what resolution we'd resolved to put those into the agreement. So at the next meeting, or the meeting at the end of the 26th, would be the opportunity to approve the TIF and then the subsequent development agreements.
So we have some very specific things that we're going to work on between now and then, but then we will have that public hearing and we'll have an opportunity at that time to take action. Very good. Any other questions, any other discussion?
Well, if we could just, I would like to get with Mr. Miles, Mr. Brakovic, so within the next week, just so everybody is on the same page with regard to the Lulu situation. I'm sure by then a determination will be made as to the turn radius and where it could be, and what a plan B might be, and what North Point might be able to do or offer to offset the relocation trauma and cost, if it's at all possible to save that business and add another gym to the diamond that's coming. So, thank you.
We have a meeting set up with Shay on Thursday afternoon, just as an update to make sure that we don't have a disconnect on where we are.
Thank you very much.
Very good. Thank you very much. Appreciate the presentation. That brings us to item number 4 on our committee agenda, and that is a resolution naming an official depository bank. I believe Ms. Jody Boding is going to present that item.
And Lou Levin is here as well to answer questions. This is a resolution that's required by the bank. It's the Brotherhood Bank and Trust, which we've done business with. They've been on the list of our eligible depositories, but there's been a change in the structure of their ownership, and they're now a division of the Bank of Labor. So we're redoing the resolution authorizing them as an eligible depository for unified government funds. If you have any questions, we'll try to answer them.
Motion to approve.
Second.
There's a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Roll call, please.
Roll call. Alvey.
Aye.
Walters.
Aye.
Garcia.
Aye.
Townsend.
Aye.
Aye. Thank you very much. That item is approved. Which brings us to item number 5 on our committee agenda, and this was the second of the 2 items included on the blue sheet. This item is a feasibility study request for proposals for a potential convention space. And Mr. Bach.
This is an interesting proposition that's really come our way in the last week. I shouldn't say in the last week. It's one over the period of the last couple of years. We've had various developers and such around the Village West corridor along 435 approach us about convention space, talk to us about doing convention space, what we might have looked at, what would we recommend in the area. And then probably more recently in the last 6 months, we've had more detailed discussions that have come up with different developers that have talked about it in the terms of the flex type space that could be used for different kinds of arenas versus flexible shows, such like that, and feeling like there was a fair amount of demand for it out in that area. When we started to have, and I think all the members on this committee have been through, as we started to talk about a little more of the potential development that's going on around that area, some of the more recent proposals, and I know, Mr. Alvey, you haven't had that, but some of the more recent proposals that we've been looking at, we were getting some more specific thoughts toward the convention space. And it was at that point, and some of the feedback we got was, okay, let's maybe get a hold of this ourselves and take a look at it from the perspective of we as the unified government ought to dictate if we think convention space is right in the Village West area, then we ought to take control of it and make sure it's being done for the long term of our community and for the benefit of our community rather than a specific development itself. So we started working on this opportunity, looking at it, had some conversation with the different parties out there, and in particular I'll say conversations with the Casino Speedway group, who, as you know, are moving forward on their hotel, 250-room hotel. They've been in designs. They were looking at the opportunity that could be something around their building as part of what they're doing, but certainly hadn't committed to anything. They're moving toward their construction date in October. Had conversations with the CVB about it, who has really been a proponent of asking many times about convention space and such like that. So we believe, and we're recommending as staff, that we go out and do our own RFP, select a consultant to do an analysis of the area and determine is it feasible, and if so, how big and what is the best location, not take it specifically to one development or another. And that way we control it and can make that decision. Additionally with that, had the follow-up conversation with both the Speedway and the CVB would be that they would both be supportive in helping to fund this proposal. So I really believe that the majority of if not all the cost, and this is something that would probably cost in the terms of $50,000, could be funded by other entities, though the unified government would be in control of it as we go through the process to make this happen. I do want to point out that in electing to do this and making the recommendation to do this and talking with the casino, a site that could come about for this could be right next to the Hollywood Casino. If that's the location, it changed the dynamic of how they are proposing to build their current hotel. So if we go through and do a study over the next 60, 90 days, come back with the information. It could be somewhere that sets over more by the Legends area, and there's a probability that it could be like that, or maybe on the other side of 435. But if it is next to the casino, it would only be proper for us to be able to tell them, well, we need you to relocate how you're setting your hotel. So if we proceed down this road, I would need to also have the conversation with them to amend their agreement. Last February, we extended their agreement. They extended to May, came back, said, we're doing the hotel. They're supposed to build in October, but if we're going to say, you need to hold on your project till we find out where we're going to build the convention center, then we would need to give them a correspondingly probably 90 days to hold on their their hotel construction, because literally they spend a lot of money on construction diagrams. I mean, they've spent probably a couple $100,000 to what they have today to be ready to submit plans for the end of June. They will spend every bit of that amount over the next 30 days after that time frame. So if this committee thinks this is a good idea, we should grab a hold of this, go out and do it. And like I said, I believe we have outside entities that would fund the majority, if not all of this proposal to do this work. Then we'll go through and get it done, get the information back as quickly as we can. And then there would be the economics of looking at how a convention center proposal would come about, and there would be corresponding discussion after that time.
Would we determine how it would be paid for later? Would we have to vote on that? Or once we vote for it, are we also voting for the payment of it?
I think the economics of the deal would be one where we'd be bringing that back. I mean, because right now I don't know, do we come back and say, is this a 100,000 square foot convention center? And obviously how, if it's something that big, what's the back room? So the economics of how much it even costs, I can't answer today.
No, I'm sorry, Doug, that's not the question I meant to ask. What I mean to ask is the cost of the study. Where is the money for the cost of the study going to come from? You've mentioned tonight that it might come from like the Speedway or other entities that might be able to pay for it. So if we say, yes, we're okay with doing a RFP on a convention center tonight, does that give you the okay to pay for that however you see fit? I don't know how else to say.
Pay for the study.
Yeah, just the study, not the convention center, the study.
Yes, that's what I'd be looking for, would be to get that. Now, I would say that I'm confident that we will get in excess of half of this paid for. And if you want to set some parameters on me for that, I mean, I'd be good with that. I mean, because in conversation with these entities, they've said, they got to go back to boards and get final approvals to do such a thing. Obviously with the CVB, but they've taken a strong look at it. They're very supportive of this type of activity. And the Speedway has committed that they would step up.
So how much is a study like this normally?
I'm thinking it's somewhere in the $50,000 to $60,000 range.
And how much money do you have?
Potentially around 50.
So you think you have the cost covered?
Yes. I'm thinking if you probably give me a range that's somewhere, if I have the latitude of that 15, I don't know what the total cost comes in, then I probably can cover this. I want to make sure we do it right.
But you think you have the cost of the study covered by outside sources?
I think I have the majority of it covered, yes.
And you don't have to come back and tell us that before you spend money, right?
I would like to be able to issue we can come back and, if I get commitments, what I'm asking is to be able to advance this to Thursday to full commission to get approval. And we likely could have the final commitments by then.
Commissioner Walters.
Okay.
Thank you. And thanks, Doug, for putting this together on such short notice, as you mentioned. I think this is a great time to proceed with studying this. As Doug said, there's a lot of interest. I see it as, being part of District 7. I see the interest and the number of visitors that we could leverage by taking advantage of the facilities that are already in existence. I'll tell you, I was at a commission Kansas Commissioners Conference in Manhattan a few weeks ago, and we don't have a facility in Kansas City, Kansas that could compete with what they have in Manhattan, Kansas. You know, they had a conference center with multiple hotels around it, and we don't have that here. So there is a need. I hope there's a market for it, but that's why we have to use this process to take out, you know, just judgment and substitute some science and true analysis. It's also interesting that when I was in Manhattan, I was having breakfast with some commissioners from Western Kansas who had brought their wives to the convention. Their wives were going to the Legends for the day from Manhattan. So we do have an asset that we should take every advantage of. And again, I think this is absolutely appropriate to do it now so that we can control our own destiny. So with that, I move we adopt the recommendation that we proceed with a feasibility and market study for a convention/conference/exhibition facility in western Wyandotte County.
Second. There's a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Yes, ma'am.
I think that this would benefit, to have the study done, would benefit the UG in that from the planning perspective, it puts us in a position of strength and knowledge. And that it's not up to whoever comes to us with this to say it goes here or it should be there. Well, that's what I want to say. It sounds reasonable, again, as Commissioner Walters says, to do it now and to have it be our study to benefit us, and we make the decision in terms of what would placement being the most profitable and feasible.
Any further comments or discussion?
I'd just say that if it exceeds your guesstimate considerably, like over $100,000, I mean, hopefully the professional judgment in that would be you'd bring it back to us. I mean, $10,000 here or there is understandable, but if it's excessively more, then I would ask you to come back.
Roll call, please.
Aye.
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 Aye. That is our final item on tonight's agenda. Our meeting is adjourned. Thank you very much.